Welcome to Mansplaining, a podcast about the interesting things and unexpected discoveries you can make if you just take the time to learn. I'm your host, Mark, and as always, I'm joined by my friend Joe, who I met in college. Together, we explore what's on our minds and try to figure out a thing or two about a thing or two. This week, we are talking about QAnon, the strange conspiracy theory that's been showing up in the news. I asked Joe to run it down and explain to me what was going on. A note about this week's audio. My microphone was not picking up sound, and so my audio was recorded through my MacBook's microphone. And I know that was not ideal. The audio was not great. But the conversation was a good one, so I hope that you will bear with us, and I promise to do better in future episodes.
All right. Discovered quite a lot, and excited to tell you about it. But I want to start by saying I feel like I need a long shower after researching this topic to kind of wash the crazy off my body. So we're taping this on August 29th, 2020, and this topic is most definitely in the zeitgeist right now. Just in the past few weeks, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the LA Times, and even the Guardian in the UK have done feature-length stories about QAnon. There's also a huge Wikipedia page devoted to it. Samantha Bee, John Oliver, Bill Maher have done segments on it on their programs. It's basically an umbrella term for a loosely organized network of far-right types who embrace a vast range of unsubstantiated conspiracy theories. Now, the through line of these theories is that they're all anti-establishment in nature. If there's a core belief, it's that Donald Trump, backed by the U.S. military, was recruited to run for president to save America and the world from a ruthless cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles who are plotting against Trump while simultaneously operating a global child sex trafficking ring. How's that for multitasking?
I know, that seems like a complicated enterprise. Like, if I was a global cabal, I think I would try to focus on one thing at a time, be shadowy and conspiratorial as best I could be, instead of trying to wage war with Donald Trump at the same time.
Yes, exactly. And here I was thinking that Donald Trump was this two-bit grifter who lucked himself into the White House when he was actually sent there to save us from this evil. Who knew?
Yes, the Times call for a overweight orange hero, and he comes to us at the hour that we need him.
Right. That's the core of it, but here's more. Trump has been feigning collusion with Russia in order to enlist Robert Mueller to join him in exposing the pedophile ring. Did you know that?
I did not know that. Let me wind that back so I'm sure I understand. Like, the whole thing with colluding with Putin and Russia is in order to recruit a single government official who otherwise could have been recruited just by a private conversation.
Yes. Putin is not in on this, but Trump is making believe that there's collusion with Russia, specifically so Robert Mueller could be appointed to oversee him and then can help him expose all these pedophiles.
Crafty.
Right. Here's the showstopper. In addition to sexually abusing children, the members of this cabal also kill and eat their victims in order to extract life-extending hormones from their blood.
Okay.
Yeah. Full disclosure, Mark, I've eaten trafficked children.
Sure. Who hasn't?
They taste like chicken.
Yeah. I mean, last time I was in New York City, there was a sidewalk vendor. I had my choice of hot dogs, pretzels, or trafficked children. And the line was longer at the hot dog cart. So, I'm right there with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, just want to make sure our listeners understand there is a conflict of interest here. But all that stuff about the life-extending properties in their blood, that's a bunch of malarkey.
Yeah, I mean, it's like antioxidants, like everything that they say about, the superfoods. Trafficked children are no better for you than kale at the end of the day.
You're probably wondering who's in this cabal of Satanist child-eating pedophiles.
Yeah, first question.
Maybe you've never been in a cabal before. Cabals are for the cool kids. You want to know how to join?
Well, I feel bad that I haven't been invited.
Yeah, well, you're out of luck any way you slice it, because this cabal is strictly for deep staters, elites from the government, from the media, and from celebrity culture. Here are some of the people who are in this cabal according to QAnon: Hillary Clinton, George Soros, Tom Hanks, Oprah Winfrey, Ellen DeGeneres, Pope Francis, the Dalai Lama, every U.S. president since Ronald Reagan, and dare I say it, even supermodel Chrissy Teigen. The goal of this motley crew is nothing less than a coup d'etat against President Trump. But Trump has been actively fighting the cabal with the help of Q, Mueller, and the armed forces. And the evidence is literally right under our feet. Some Q followers are sure that there are 35,000 malnourished and caged mole children recently rescued by military personnel from secret tunnels under Central Park in New York City.
Well, sure. Honestly, if I had a passel of mole children, I would definitely bury them under Central Park, because what more obscure and yet secure location could there be than a well-trafficked park within the United States' most populous city?
World famous with thousands of people there every day, yes.
And it does not surprise me at all that Tom Hanks is involved in this, because just sinister is the word that everyone applies to them.
Right. And he's in everything, right? So why not, he must be in this cabal.
Just to network professionally, it seems. Like if you've got a Hollywood career and you're not in the cabal, then seriously, you're holding yourself back.
So I read all this stuff about QAnon and their central organizing principle, and I was thinking to myself, I've heard this all before. This is deja vu all over again. Remember Pizzagate?
I do.
It happened a year before Q's emergence in December 2016. Shortly after Trump's victory over Hillary Clinton, a man named Edgar Madison Welch, reacting to a flurry of online postings about a pedophilia ring linked to Hillary, drove several hours from his home in North Carolina to Washington, D.C., to break up what he thought was a child sex trafficking ring run by Hillary and her former campaign chairman, John Podesta, out of the basement of the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria. Welch fired shots from his AR-15 assault rifle into the locked door of the pizzeria, then burst into the restaurant. But he found no evidence of sex trafficking inside, and in fact he found no basement in this building. So he dropped his weapon, walked out, and was promptly arrested and convicted, and now he's serving a 4-year prison term.
Yeah, I remember hearing about this.
Before we leave it, I just want to mention that Pizzagate was back in the news last week in connection with Kamala Harris, our newly anointed Democratic vice presidential nominee. Some emails were shared on social media indicating that Kamala's sister Maya Harris had apparently been invited to a pizza party in honor of Hillary Clinton. Knowing full well what Hillary plus pizza equals, nod nod wink wink, the QAnon community went berserk, spreading all kinds of false rumors on social media of Harris's involvement in child trafficking. The New York Times reported that this falsehood had reached more than 600,000 people on Facebook the day after Harris's nomination. Some people have described QAnon as the big budget sequel to Pizzagate, in that it takes the same basic conspiracy theory about child sex trafficking and adds narrative layers and all kinds of plot twists. But the right-wing preoccupation with pedophilia and the sex trafficking of children goes back way farther than Pizzagate. For years, there have been right-aligned, not-for-profit groups like Operation Underground Railroad, whose mission is to rescue children from the clutches of traffickers by organizing strike teams of citizens armed with long guns and body armor. Nearly 1 million people follow OUR on Facebook. The group raised more than $22 million in 2019, and its founder and CEO, Tim Ballard, was appointed by President Trump as an advisor on anti-trafficking efforts. What's troubling is that QAnon points to these groups' activities as vindication for their own conspiracy theories, while groups like OUR welcome the free publicity brought to their cause by QAnon, while studiously refusing to comment on the legitimacy of QAnon's conspiracy theories. I'm sorry to report to you that QAnon started on my birthday. The first posting came on October 28th, 2017 on 4chan, which is an anonymous and highly toxic message board favored by racists, porn enthusiasts, and other, shall we say, deplorables. Q was not the first Anon to post to 4chan. Before QAnon, there was CIA Anon, FBI Anon, several other self-proclaimed insiders. But for whatever reason, QAnon is the one whose popularity skyrocketed.
And you said the first post was on your birthday.
Yeah, my 54th birthday.
Let me cut to the chase. Was pizza served at that party, Joe?
It may have been, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So QAnon started on 4chan, then moved to 8chan, which is another fever swamp for reactionaries.
Yeah, I've heard that 8chan is notorious for having even fewer rules than 4chan has.
Yes, exactly. And that site was taken down last year after all the support it generated for the mass shooting of all those Latinx people in El Paso, Texas. So that was the end of 8chan. But from there, Q moved to another site called 8kun. That's KUN. It's a site run by the former owner of 8chan. I never heard of 8kun before doing this research, but that's where Q's postings are right now. So in his first posting, he identified himself as Q Clearance Patriot, quote unquote. Later became known simply as Q. He claimed to be a high-ranking intelligence officer with access to classified information. There is such a thing as a Q classification in government. That's real. It refers to the Energy Department's highest level of security clearance, usually relating to nuclear weapons. So I'm going to read you Q's first posting verbatim. And I quote, HRC extradition already in motion, effective yesterday, with several countries in case of cross-border run, period. Passport approved to be flagged, effective 10:30 at 12:01 a.m. Expect massive riots organized in defiance and others fleeing the U.S. to occur. It appears to be predicting Hillary Clinton's imminent arrest. Obviously, that didn't happen, nor have any of the things that Q has predicted since then, but that hasn't stopped people from trying to decipher all his cryptic pronouncements ever since.
You know what this reminds me of is the Oracle of Delphi back in classical times. The Oracle would always pronounce the prediction about the future that was supposed to be coming from God in the most obscure possible way. And then there was a secondary market around the temple to decipher what it was that the god had communicated. And so it's like Q is playing that same card, is that the more obscure, like Nostradamus' predictions, same thing.
Yeah, I was just thinking of Nostradamus.
Completely incomprehensible, and therefore, if you think, oh, well, this is what he's predicting, and it doesn't happen, it gives you an out, because then you can just say, well, we just didn't interpret it properly.
So the identity of Q has been the subject of endless speculation by believers and by the media. Nobody knows who Q is. Q could be multiple people, maybe just a single internet troll. Maybe it's a Russian troll farm. Who the hell knows? But whoever it is, Q is seen by believers as a patriot and even as a saint, fighting the good fight behind the scenes to expose and bring to justice this fiendish pedophile cabal. Since that first posting, which is just less than 3 years ago, there have been more than 4,500 postings or drops made by Q. And many take the form of mysterious coded messages, often touching on familiar right-wing grievance talking points about perceived enemies. You see initials like LL, which refers to former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, HRC for Hillary Rodham Clinton, Guess what President Obama's code name is.
It's going to be offensive, isn't it? I'm going to guess KI for Kenyan imposter.
That's a good guess. The correct answer is Hussein, his middle name. There's also a bunch of alphanumeric codes that Q uses in a lot of his early messages in particular. And these codes read like gobbledygook, but they are closely parsed online by what I would call the Q industrial complex, which includes not just millions of readers, but also self-proclaimed decoders, people who interpret Q's vague posts for the rest of us, just like you were saying about the Oracle of Delphi. Some of the things that Q and his adherents believe read, to me at least, like a greatest hits of recent right-wing fever dreams. Here are some good ones I picked out for you. German Chancellor and Trump nemesis Angela Merkel is actually Adolf Hitler's granddaughter. Did you know that?
I did not know. It's a very small world, isn't it?
Mass shootings in America are false flag operations organized by the evil cabal to distract our attention from all their sex trafficking. Former DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida hired the MS-13 gang to murder DNC staffer Seth Rich. Here's my favorite. JFK Jr. faked his death in a plane crash, then assumed the identity of a Pittsburgh man named Vincent Fusca, and then JFK Jr. decided he would become Q. He's now acting as Q, and he will be Trump's vice presidential running mate this year. Mike Pence obviously didn't get that memo.
Okay, we need to unpack that one. Okay, so JFK Jr. fakes his own death, and he becomes this Pittsburgh man named Fusca.
Fusca, F-U-S-C-A, yes.
And is that an actual person? Like, do we know Fusca from anything else? Because otherwise it's a strange specific. Pittsburgh and Fusca are two things that I would not have anticipated for JFK Jr. And he does this because the deep state pedophiles are mobilizing against him, and he needs to go deep undercover. But becoming this Pittsburgh man, he somehow gets the Department of Energy's highest clearance level.
Yes.
So he rises pretty quickly through the ranks. This JFK Jr., considering he had to take the bar exam, 8 times before he passed? He's deceptively smart.
Yep, and that's the way the story goes when you're deeply undercover. He is Q, but he apparently will not be Trump's running mate. Anyway, this online world of QAnon, it's a dynamic environment. People read Q's drops, then they post about it on Reddit and Twitter or in other chat rooms, and other believers create Facebook pages, YouTube channels devoted to parsing every word. If you ever have 100 hours to kill, Mark, you should check it out.
I feel like I will always have other things to do with this 100 hours, but I guess we'll see how it goes.
Right. So, in your original question, when you put it to me last time, you mentioned a furniture wholesaler. Remember that? On July 9th, somebody posted the following on a Reddit forum for conspiracy theories, and I quote, "Is it possible Wayfair involved in human trafficking with their WFX utility collection? Or are these just extremely overpriced cabinets?" That post provoked nearly 3,000 comments, stoked largely by QAnon supporters. Their claim was that expensive furniture with human names like Samaya posted on Wayfair's website were actually missing children being trafficked by the company. And the dimensions, weights, and prices of the products on sale described the children being sold. I'm just wondering, who the hell sells $17,000 desks? What, are they made of solid gold?
I remember when I first heard about it, that was really what was setting off this sequence of questions, because in some cases it was very ordinary kitchen cabinetry that was being sold for tens of thousands of dollars, and it seemed impossible that anyone would ever pay that amount for it.
So I guess it's not a long deduction from there to think that they must be children, huh?
Well, yeah. What else could it be? I mean, the mind immediately goes to sex trafficked children.
Right. So Wayfair obviously had to respond to these charges. So they acknowledge that they use an algorithm to name their products, and the algorithm uses first names and geographical locations, among other things. But they said that, quote, there is, of course, no truth to these claims.
Which, of course, you would expect to hear from a member of a shadowy cabal.
Yeah, you're with me here. I just was going to say, let's do a little thought experiment here and put on our QAnon hats for a second, shall we? Mine is actually a beret.
I was thinking like a big witch's hat from Halloween, but
Oh, that's even better. Okay, listen. Hear me out on this. If you think about it, Wayfair's own commercial jingle gives the lie to their denial. Here's the jingle. You've probably heard it a million times on TV. Wayfair, you've got just what I need. So, Mark, you're a cannibalistic pedophile. What do you need?
I need more children because I have already eaten the ones that I had before.
Exactly. You need to taste the blood of trafficked children. So how can Wayfair have just what I need if it isn't trafficking children?
It's either a lie, which would be shameful of them, or it's a implicit promise of something that's even more shameful.
I think the evidence of Wayfair's guilt is right there in the jingle. Case closed. There are some slogans associated with QAnon that I want to tell you about. Q's true believers are waiting for two major events to take place. The first is the storm, which comes from a remark made by President Trump during an October 2017 photo op with some generals. He was asked by reporters what they were all up to, and Trump replied, "Maybe it's the calm before the storm." Asked what that meant, he said, "You'll find out." That remark came to be seen by Q's adherents as code for the time when Trump will finally make America great again by rounding up all the evildoers and banishing them to the military prison at Guantanamo Bay, where they will finally be executed. The second event is the Great Awakening, which is some unspecified happening in which the whole world will experience an epiphany that QAnon was right about everything. WWG1WGA, do you know what that means?
WWG1GA?
It stands for Where We Go One, We Go All. This is the movement's primary social media hashtag, and it's mostly used to celebrate the unity and patriotism that will come after President Trump rids the world of blood-sucking pedophiles.
Yeah, which brings to mind the origin of the term fascist. Have you heard that? The term fascist comes from a Italian term, which means bundle of sticks, because the Italian fascist party, before they were called fascists, used it as an analogy that a single twig can easily be snapped in two, but a bundle of twigs is strong.
Yeah. This WWG1WGA is also used as an oath of sorts. QAnon has a bunch of self-proclaimed digital soldiers, and they take this oath, where we go one, we go all. They take it on joining the team. Finally, the last slogan I have for you is follow the white rabbit. And this phrase encourages you to go down that rabbit hole and dig for more information about the deep state, usually by watching hours of YouTube videos.
Of course, the original Follow the White Rabbit reference was to Lewis Carroll's, Alice Through the Looking Glass, and the White Rabbit led her into absolute 100% crazy town, which I'm seeing some analogies here.
Yes. Yeah, good point. So much of the focus of Q and his believers is on Trump. Whenever Trump says the number 17, which is the letter Q's place in the alphabet, the true believers take it as a sign that he's sending coded messages to them.
Does he say the number 17 frequently?
I don't know. When he wears a pink tie, they think he's referring to Code Pink, which is a hospital term for a child abduction in progress.
Does he wear pink ties frequently?
I know he wears a lot of red ties. I can't recall seeing him in a pink tie. But Trump's reactions to Q are also interesting. Trump amplifies Q's voice by frequently retweeting the message of Q's followers. He's done it at least 200 times, according to Media Matters. Just last week, during a White House news conference, Trump declined to disavow the movement and described QAnon followers as people that love our country. Trump's re-election campaign has relied on Q's social media accounts to disseminate its ads and its tweets. And as Trump amplifies Q, Q amplifies Trump's messaging. Q believers have come out en masse against wearing masks, and they're in favor of federalizing troops to quell the perceived riots in U.S. cities. It's like the Tea Party finally discovered social media.
And it's such a perfect symbiotic relationship, isn't it? Because the QAnon movement is based on the belief that Donald Trump is this singular savior figure, the most important person in the world, and everyone arrayed against him is a loser and a creep. And Trump believes all of the same things. He is a narcissist who believes he is a singular savior figure, the most important person in the world, and everyone arrayed against him is a loser and a creep. So it's like watching a tennis match between twins where they just keep banging the ball back to one.
When you factor in President Trump's constant invoking of the deep state to characterize his enemies, you can understand why this brand of conspiracy has gained so much traction at this particular time. And like any good conspiracy theory, the QAnon story is flexible enough to adapt to whatever is in the news at the time. For example, when the feds were snatching people off the streets of Portland, that was just Trump delivering on Q's promises to rid the world of evil.
One Portland teenager at a time.
Yeah, right. When tech companies censor QAnon adherents on their platforms, that's just the evil cabal flexing its muscles and underscoring its threat to civilization. The Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell sex trafficking ring is just further evidence of pedophilia run amok.
Even though Donald Trump appeared in a number of photos and videos with Jeffrey Epstein, who he described as a personal friend.
A writer for the New Republic put it well, I think, writing, quote, QAnon's paranoid fantasies align with the general and uncomfortable sense that there is no one in charge.
Yeah, well, for the last 4 years, that has been our daily reality.
Yeah, no, I was just about to say the same thing. Never truer than in Trump's America, huh? So it's really hard to quantify how many people believe in Q's theory about the cabal of pedophiles, or at least are sympathetic to the idea of the deep state against Trump. But we do have some metrics from social media. There are thousands of QAnon groups on Facebook, and some of the most popular ones have more than 100,000 members each. So it's very likely that there are at least a few million followers on Facebook alone. There are also more than 150,000 Twitter accounts associated with Q, and there's more than 130,000 Q-related videos on YouTube. And this is probably why Time magazine listed Q as one of the 25 most influential people on the internet in 2018. Hasn't made People's Sexiest Man Alive yet, but that's probably coming next year.
It doesn't surprise me, honestly, because as someone who's worked in social media, I've read studies about what's shared. Like what are the factors that make something viral and pick up an audience in social media? And there's a series of emotional triggers. And on that list are things like surprise, astonishment, fear, and outrage.
Yes.
And so it reminds me of that old theory of memes. Before they became funny pictures on the internet, memes was an idea of ideas that would travel from host to host the way a virus does. And I feel like QAnon is just a virus that is particularly well adapted to survive and prosper on digital forms.
Yes.
It is in the competing circus of ideas This is what bubbled up because it's the one that is best equipped to leverage the forces of social media and get itself spread from host to host.
Yeah, it's like social media is like the petri dish for the virus, right?
Right, and it's going to evolve the most malignant one, the one that will travel to the largest number of hosts as quickly as possible.
Yes, because outrage is what moves eyeballs on social media, so it's bound to happen.
Yeah, so kind of inevitable, kind of inevitable. And just like we talked about on the Spanish flu, there are certain factors that made that travel worldwide, one of which was soldiers in trenches coming back home. And so this is the epidemic of our lifetime, not just COVID, but that there's also a digital epidemic going on at the same time.
So the social media companies are finally starting to remove or at least rein in some of these QAnon accounts, but this reckoning comes way too late to undo the damage that's already done. Uh, the New York Times describes the climate as, quote, that there's a faction of Americans who think with complete sincerity that the leaders of the opposition party are kidnapping and cannibalizing innocent children, end quote. So that horse has left the proverbial barn, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's the part that really strikes me is that we've reached the point in political discourse where Republicans are looking across the fence at Democrats and not seeing people who disagree, but they are seeing pure literal evil that must be like erased from the earth.
Right.
And at that point, there's no such thing as political discourse. There's no such thing as a conversation about what's best for this country. It's a zero-sum game. And that makes me despair because I don't know how we can have a nation of this size and this amount of diversity where that big of a slice of the American public is just not willing to share power with anybody else.
Right. And I see it largely the same way, but I try to have some humility about this. And as much as I would like to ascribe QAnon to all these wackadoodle right wingers and it's all their fault, I actually think it says a lot about our shared American obsession for conspiracy theories. Studies have shown that conspiratorial worldviews cut across political orientations. More than half of Americans endorse at least one conspiracy theory, whether it be world domination by the Trilateral Commission or the Illuminati, or anti-Semitic tropes about the Rothschilds and their control of international banking establishment, or more recent freakouts like vaccines cause autism, 5G towers cause the coronavirus. More than half of Americans believe this crap.
Yeah, and I think that's curious. I think that's curious that in pretty much all of those cases, you have a pretty simple, straightforward explanation for a certain thing in the world. And the conspiracy theory says no, there's actually a much more complicated truth behind that apparent simple truth. And I think it's interesting that so many people grasp the complicated conspiracy theory instead of the pretty simple truth.
Yeah, you're right. And also, I'm thinking that this is not the first time that masses of people have been duped by misinformation spread by modern media. I'm a huge Beatles fan. 50 years ago, there were legions of Beatles fans who believed Paul McCartney was dead, and they gathered evidence to support that thesis from clues supposedly placed by the surviving Beatles in their music and on their album covers. I myself was a believer in the biggest of all American conspiracy theories, that there was a second assassin lurking on the grassy knoll in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963. Not only did I believe that for years, but the writer and director Oliver Stone, who was most definitely not a right-wing Republican, made a movie called JFK back in the early 1990s. You may have seen it. That movie not only propagated the second shooter theory, but it also imagined a crusading president done in by a deep state conspiracy that included pedophiles. So this stuff is nothing new. Many of us have drunk from this same Kool-Aid, including yours truly. And as for Trump's role in all of this, in the QAnon worldview, I would argue that it's about making meaning where there isn't any. Some people want to believe that the razor-thin electoral college victory of this pathetic excuse for a human being by minority of voters is somehow a bellwether of the systemic change that they desperately want and need to see in this country. But like many things attributed to Trump, it's not a considered choice. Remember, Mark, this guy doesn't read anything. So I'd be willing to bet my bank account that he doesn't have a clue what QAnon is. He likes Q because Q and his supporters like him. He supports whoever supports him, whether it be neo-Nazis in Charlottesville or the murderous thugs in Moscow and Pyongyang, or the batshit pedophile conspiracy theorists. He's with them if they're with him.
Well, it's one more feature of how QAnon is the perfect conspiracy theory for its time.
Yes.
And that they have
Yes.
attached themselves to a narcissist, where a normal president would have disavowed them and possibly taken wind out of their sails. This is the conspiracy theory that is perfectly tuned to attach themselves to a narcissist who will fan the flames.
Yes, and aligned to this cult of personality that is the Trump movement and its hostile takeover of the Republican Party. But let me close on this with this. QAnon is not only a political movement, but it's also a social community for a lot of people, and it's an entertainment source for a lot of other people. I was reading this expert on cults. Her name is Rachel Bernstein, and she wrote something interesting. I'm going to quote: "What a movement such as QAnon has going for it, and why it will catch on like wildfire, is that it makes people feel connected to something important that other people don't yet know about. So ultimately, the Q phenomenon is more about us than it is about Q, whoever Q is. Friend of mine suggested that Q is proof that people must believe in something. And when truth is no longer an option of something to believe in, then they might be willing to believe in whatever you put in front of them."
Yeah, there's an old theory of religion by Emil Durkheim, who was one of the founding sociologists, and he said that religion is about what he called collective effervescence, which is essentially the feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself. So it would be that experience in a Christian revival where you're in the church and they're singing the hymns and everyone's on their feet and clapping and you feel this amazing charge. And in that moment, you feel like you're inhabited by the Holy Spirit. And it's very similar to what you experience if you're at a baseball game and in the bottom of the ninth, someone hits a home run to win the game for your team and you're on your feet and hearing the roar of the crowd and adding your voice to that roar and feeling like, oh my God, this is amazing. I think she's right. I think QAnon gives you a sense of collective effervescence, that you are part of something big and part of something important. And it gives meaning to a life which you might have started to question.
Yeah, and like my earlier point about conspiracy theories, that cuts across all partisan identification. That's not something that we can hang on the right wingers alone, that's all of us. So this is a particularly noxious conspiracy theory that may wreak havoc yet to come in our country, but it's completely understandable and kind of natural if you think about it. And on that inspiring note, that's it. I'm done. That's all I got. I hope I helped to answer the question for you.
You did. It was a enlightening and harrowing experience. So thank you for being my white rabbit, taking me down this hole.
We may both need showers when this is done.
Most definitely. So, would you like to ask me your question?
Yeah. And I'm half nervous that this question is no longer going to be relevant by the time you get back to me on it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Because I was really surprised by the news this week that a number of pro sports teams had decided to boycott games. And in the case of the NBA and the NHL, it was actually playoff games to protest the recent shooting of yet another unarmed black man. My question is, has a politically motivated professional sports boycott like that ever happened before?
I don't know, but I will do my best to find out, and we will talk about it next time.
All right, great.
And that brings us to the close of another episode of the Mansplaining Podcast. Thank you for being with us, and hoping that you join us in the next one.
See you next time.
That's it for this edition of Mansplaining. Mansplaining is brought to you by Joe and Mark and nobody else. Thank you for hanging out with us for a little bit, and we'll see you next time.